Hey everyone, this is Mathmetrics, and in this video, we're going to be covering part 3 of my little mini-series on audio editing in the latest Bitwig 3.2. This video is going to cover another pretty confusing subject, which is fades and crossfading. That's all we're going to talk about. Crossfading especially will drive you nuts at first because it doesn't really work like in other DAWs, and there are some definite tricks and gotchas. However, once you wrap your head around it, it is pretty simple to understand what to do and how to successfully crossfade anything you want. All right, if you haven't yet seen parts 1 and 2, you really should go back and watch them. At the very least, watch part 1, because there's some big picture stuff you need to understand, or things I jump right into in this video won't make a lot of sense to you. Okay, so fades. There's 2 types of fades. There's end fades and crossfades, and there's some gestures, some special gestures that will let you do fading quickly and easily. Up here in the arranger, you can see if I put my cursor just under the dark colored title bar, this little white triangle appears. Same thing on this side. So the quick and easy way to do fades is to grab that triangle, hold your mouse pointer down, and start dragging inward. You can do a fade in and fade out this way. If you put your cursor over the line, you can curve the fade in and fade out any way you want, right? And then if you look over in the inspector, there's actually 2 different shapes to the curve. Here's your fade in and fade out section for the arranger clip. And you can either have a single logarithmic style fade or exponential fade, if you will. And then there's this S-shaped fade, which will let you get a slightly different fade behavior if you want. Okay, so that's basic manual fading. As long as you want it to be, zoom in, get it really detailed, and you can see that the waveform actually responds to the fade as you move it. You can see the waveform get smaller, so you can visually see what you're doing to the waveform. So that's manual fades. That's pretty simple. It's easy to do. It's easy to understand. If you want to undo your fades and get back to like basics, you can maybe from the right-click menu. Yeah, you can do reset fades from the right-click menu, or remember the shortcut sequence. You can also do it from the contextual clip menu. There's a reset fades there. Now let's talk about auto fades, because that's another useful one. Auto fades you can get to from the right-click menu or from the clip menu, and it's right here. And if you do that, nothing seems to happen, right? But that's because we're looking at a big clip that spans 4 bars. If you look over here, you can see that it put these tiny little microfades, 0.07 milliseconds on either side, right? Tiny little fades. If we zoom way in, we'll see the fade, right? And if we zoom way in here on this side, there's the fade. And you can see they're a different shape. This one's completely linear. The other one had a more exponential curve and it wanted to get into the waveform faster. And the reason it does this is if there's a transient here at the start of the clip, it wants you to hear as much of that transient as possible. But it still wants to make sure you don't start from a positive DC offset if this sample isn't correctly lined up. Like if I slide this sample to where this big positive DC swing of the waveform, right? If I put it there, we don't ever want to start a clip with a big swing like that, because if I reset fades, you'll see the problem. Let's reset fades. You never want to start a clip like that, or you'll hear a pop, you'll hear a click, right? So that's what auto fade's good for. Is it's like if you don't want to zoom in and really like say, okay, am I at a 0 crossing? Am I exactly at a 0 crossing, right? So that I don't get any pops or clicks. If you don't want to deal with any of that, you don't want to zoom in, you don't want to waste time on that. You just want to eyeball, like, let's start this clip on its snare, right? Good enough. I don't really care. And I just want to make sure there's no pops or clicks because I don't want to have to stop and zoom in and see if I'm in the middle of the waveform, in the middle of this big, huge transient or not. Well, just right click on it and do auto fades, or use the shortcut to auto fade it. And now you just know, even if there is a big transient there, I've just faded it down to 0 at the very start of the clip. And because this is this kind of exponential fade that goes up fast and then starts slowing down over to here, even though it's only a short 7 milliseconds long, right? Like if I select the fade and find where that is and select this amount of time, see it's no 0.1 seconds, but it's really technically 7 milliseconds, right? More or less. It's short, it goes up quickly, then it slows down. And so I'm going to catch as much of that transient as possible. If you really want to be crazy, you could come in here and make it even more exponential. But you're still going to have absolute silence at the very beginning of the clip. And that's what you want. You don't want to be coming in the middle of a big DC offset. Even if I slide the clip over here, see, it just keeps shrinking it down to nothing at the beginning there. So that's fades, crossfades, auto fades, and resetting fades. I'm sorry, regular fades and auto fades. Let's get rid of all those fades. Let's now start talking about the complex thing. Well, actually, before I do that, let's talk about one more thing. Let's get this clip back in here and set it up again. Now, this clip is running at a tempo of 114 BPM. My project's at 110, so one of the first things I need to do is flip it into a warping mode or a stretch mode. Elastic Pro is my absolute favorite for clean stretching. Unlike in Ableton, where Complex Pro is a dirty word because it usually sounds terrible, especially on highly transient material like drum loops, in Bitwig, Elastic Pro is actually the best, absolute best, all-around stretching algorithm for cleanness, even for highly transient material. See how it says transient preserving spectral stretching? It's really good about transients. So if you want the cleanest possible stretching, always go for Elastic Pro. All these other ones are just options when you want a slightly different sound or behavior. This is the #1 thing I go for every time when I want to stretch, and I want to keep it clean, even drum stuff. Okay, but it works great on vocals and melodic material and everything. So this is the #1. Go for this every time. So I flipped it into a stretch mode, and now I just say, well, I know that the tempo of the clip is 114. We can see that a lot of my beats are off the grid here. But if I change this to 114, now everything is lined up right on the grid. All these transients are exactly where I expect them to be. And you can get an even better view of that here, right? Okay, so let's talk about fades down in the event itself, because up here we're just doing fades on the clip container, on the parent clip, and you can see that there's this whole section of fades for a clip. There are no fades for an arranger clip. Arranger clips don't have a concept of fading. There's no fade. Nothing here. I mean, there's a fade at the end, but it's typically like a really micro fade. That's the only fade, is what happens at the end before we come back in at the beginning. So you'll want to make sure your waveforms are a little clean here, right? Like, how can I do this? If I'm in the arranger clip and I slide the waveform so that, you know, we're looking at something like a kick sample. Let's see if I can get it to hit a kick in the middle. See, it's a little harder to work with this mode because it doesn't update this in real time. Let's just do it this way. We'll slide it down here. Hello? Yeah, that's right. You're not going to let me do this way, are you? Let's go. Yeah, this is how I have to do it. So I'm holding this. I'm looking for a big fat transient like this one. Let's use the kick. Let's come in on the kick transient. Let's slide it slightly over the edge of the start of the loop, right? So if I zoom way in here, we can see here's the start. Let's slide this some more. Let's put that big old humping DC offset right at the start of the loop, okay? This is very bad. We do not want this to be in an arranger clip because every time this clip starts and loops around to the beginning, you're gonna hear a big pop because of this DC offset. So it's a little more awkward to set up your fades for if you're working strictly in the arranger, and not, I'm sorry, in the launcher, not in the arranger. So let's look at how to do this, right? I don't have a track mode. I don't have any other modes. This is the mode I'm stuck working in. So how do we fix this so that I want it to start there, but I don't want the big pop. I want to have a fade. So the trick for this is you need to first like slide your waveform where you want it by dragging the header of the audio event and just dragging it around. You can hold shift to unlock it from the grid, right? We'll put that back here. And then the thing to do is to look at where the start of your actual clip is, or your looping point for the clip. Because remember, we set this to have an offset. So let's actually drag the start of the clip over here too. All right. Then what you want to do is find the edge of the audio event and drag it inward until it snaps on the grid line. Now we have the audio event starting at this point, at the same point that the clip starts. And now we can see again that this DC offset is chopping, we're cutting right through the DC offset. But you'll notice on the event itself inside the clip, there's still a fade handle. And sure enough, you can put a fade in here. You can shape the fade, right? Any way you want. You can right click and reset fades. You can right click and auto fade. Boom, done. Okay. Now here's the thing about right clicking and doing something like auto fades. Let's reset the fades and let's drag this back out again. If I do auto fade now, look where it's set up the fade from. The fade is always relative to the start of the event. So this is why sometimes you want to make sure the event itself is lined up with the start of the clip. And that way your fades will behave the way you expect them to. Now we have a nice auto fade to keep that big positive DC offset from being a problem in the context of the clip launcher when it's just looping over and over. So again, this is one of those quirky things. For whatever reason, they gave us a fade value for the end of the clip, for the looping fade at the end of this loop bar. They just have this nice clean automatic value for wherever the end of the loop is, put an auto fade of exactly 8 milliseconds there. And you could make it longer if you wanted by dragging and changing these values, you could. And you can even see the crossfade visually appear in this little bar. See that crossfade, right? So it's making a kind of an automatic crossfade for the behavior of the arranger, but you can't really set your start fade unless you work in the event itself and make sure the event is kind of lined up with the start of the loop or whatever. And let's also make sure that this is actually the event because I moved it. It's actually shorter now, but if we get it lined up with the beginning of things, now that fade will make sense, right? Based on the end of the clip and the end of the loop. There's a little micro fade on the event itself. And back over here, let's get this back up over here. Right. So just be aware of that when you're working in the arranger, it's a little bit different to work with fades. And the other point I was trying to make is that there is the ability to put fades on the events themselves. And that's going to come in very handy in just a minute when I start talking about crossfading in particular. Now, there's one other weird little gotcha about, and by the way, here's where you can see the fade in and fade out properties for an audio event is down in the event set of properties, as opposed to up here in the clip. These are the fade in and fade out for the clip. right? I'm in the arranger now, but if I select the event, now I can see the fade in and fade out properties for the event inside the clip. Okay, so here's the other big gotcha. This is a setting that by default, I don't personally like the way it's set up by default. I think it's under audio. Where is it hiding? Recording, user interface. Come on, where are you? I want to say it's here. Auto arm, audio. See, I set it and forget it, so I've forgotten where it is. I guess it's right here. Yeah, here we go. This button, I think, is on by default when you first install Bitwig. So for you, this might be on. And I think this is a terrible, terrible option to have on by default. For those of us that do tons and tons of audio editing, I do not want, I'm going to turn it on and leave it on for a second. Notice it says default fade length 10 milliseconds. If I come over to this clip and I come into this audio event inside the clip, I'm going to put my cursor anywhere inside here. I'm going to do a split, Control E to split. And I zoom in really, really close. See what it did there? It put this stupid crossfade, a worthless crossfade. It's actually an incorrect crossfade, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. It's not actually doing anything. This is an outright bug. I've reported this bug back in 3.1 or 3.0. I don't believe they've fixed it yet. There are some situations where an automatically created fade from this property setting might come in useful, but I've never found any kind of situation where this is useful. So I highly recommend that you find this property and turn it off and forget it exists, because you do not want this happening. Let's undo this and let's do another split here again. This is what you want. You want a clean split. And if you need to do a fade because something about that split is creating a pop, like normally you would split something in order to move it. Like I want to take this kick and little ghost kick that happens right after it. I want to split those, and maybe I want to duplicate them, right? So they do 2 in a row. And if there's something funky about like a DC offset or something right here where you did the split, then yeah, you might want to put in some fades, but you're going to probably want to do it manually, right? You're going to want to manually put in a fade, or you're just going to want to right click on both of these. Like you can multi-select them. Select this one, hold shift, select this one, and then do auto fade. And it'll automatically put auto fades at both edges of both of these clips you've selected, right? I like to have personal surgical control over fades. I do not want Bitwig doing fades for me. I never want a DAW doing fades for me. So I highly recommend you turn that thing off. And if you're doing splitting and surgical stuff, right, figure out the fade situation for yourself. Do you even need a fade here? No, that's so quiet. No one's going to hear anything. They're right together. They're exactly the way they were before. There's no point in doing a fade. Even if I do something like take this clip and for whatever reason make it 6 dB louder, I don't care. There's not enough of a volume difference between here and here to necessitate any kind of fade or crossfading, right? It's pretty rare when you're doing audio editing inside a clip that you need to mess with fades. I should say mess with start and end fades. Just not necessary. The only time you need to really understand fades between audio events is when you're crossfading. And that's what we're going to get into right now. So crossfading, oh my God, this is the thing I see so many questions about, and I struggled with this for so long. So let me see if I can help you avoid some of those same struggles. Let's start from scratch again. Let's bring in this clip, set it to elastic, set it to 114 to line up with the grid. And now let's bring in another clip, a different one. Let's bring in That's good. So I've got two different drum clips. This one's at a tempo of 115. So we're going to click it, go to Elastic Pro, set this value to 115. And now both clips are grid aligned. Everything's good, right? You can see down here, all the transients are right on the grid, right where they're supposed to be. So here's where you often run into situations where you need to crossfade to get a smooth result. Let's say I want to play the first half of this clip, and then I want to jump into the second half of this clip. Okay, so I want to start from this point in this clip, and I want to, get into there from, let's say I only want to play the first beat of this clip. So if I were to take this entire clip and just shorten it up to 1 bar, so it stops there. And then I want to merge into this clip here, and I want both of these to just sound together like one clip. So watch what happens. I've done it the old school way, like you would do it in other DAWs. I made the clip shorter, lined them up end to end, and here's what it's going to sound like. Now you may think that sounds okay, and you may think I don't need to do any crossfading here, but let's do the crossfading anyway, just for academic purposes. See here, the signal's pretty cleanly moving from one hit to another hit. Let's see if I can find an example where the crossfading would be really handy. Just going to look for something a little dirtier. Where would I usually do this? I'd usually do it on a backbeat, downbeat. Okay, here we've got a little bit of energy still going on here. And that might call for a crossfade. And let's play with this one a little more. Let's find something that's got a lot of energy at the start of it. Of course, that's in the wrong place. Let me just slide the audio waveform. See, I've made the underlying event smaller than before. So again, this is why I spent a lot of time showing you how to see events. Let's do a little quick surgery. I'm going to grab the edge of the clip and make it longer. Grab the edge of the clip, make it longer, then come into the event and just like find where's the actual start and end of this event. Come here. Oh, come on, I know it's bigger than this. No, I guess it was the whole event. My bad. Okay, so let's just find a spot in this event that's a little messy. How long are you? 2 bars. Where is it messy? It's kind of messy. Okay, it's messy here. Let's do this. We're going to make this a 2-beat clip. Drag this in. And then over here, okay, so we got 2 beats. And we want to merge that into this thing. And there's a little bit of a mess here and a little bit of a mess here. And I still am not happy with this example. I'm trying to find something that's 2 beats long but messy. See, this one's so damn clean. Let's bring in a different sample. Gotta find something that's gonna make sense for y'all here. No, something noisy, boomy. Yeah, okay, that's noisy. 14, stretch. When we talk about stretching mode in the next video, I'll explain why you don't always have to do this manual thing. It's because there's bad metadata in the name of this clip. A lot of times if a clip is named properly, Bitwig will automatically know what its original tempo is, but these are cool, but they're messed up in terms of their metadata. So here's what I want. I have a clip and I want to use, for whatever reason, let's go a little further than that. Yeah, let's use 1.5 beats, and then I want to end it on this other clip. And now we have a situation that's typically messy and would typically call for a crossfade. Let's hear what this sounds like. okay? It's quiet enough that it's not that jarring and you could choose to live with it, but let's say we want to be graceful and we want to actually truly have a crossfade here to manage the energy that's happening here versus the energy that's happening here and the sudden, especially because this energy has some positiveness to it, right? So the basic idea with crossfades is this. In theory, you simply take the fade marker from the clip on one side, in theory, and you drag it over into the clip on the other side. And then some weird things happen. It moved the border of this clip. It made this clip longer. It moved this clip over one beat, right? Let's undo that, watch it again. Crossfade, it moved it over an entire beat. And now what's what? Did I get a crossfade? It looked like it moved this clip. What's going on, right? So there's a lot of confusion here. You don't know if the crossfade happened. It's not easy to see. It moved the borders of your clips. That's also really weird and confusing, kind of, sort of, right? And other DAWs have this same confusion, and other DAWs manage this confusion and visualize things for you in different ways. But Bitwig is what it is. So I'm just going to show you how to work with this, how to see and work around this type of confusion. Like the question is always, should I crossfade from this direction? Or should I crossfade from this direction? Which is going to work? Which is going to create a true crossfade? Which is going to give me the behavior I want? This can be really confusing at first. So let me give you a couple rules of thumb. The first rule of thumb is almost always, if you're going to crossfade from one waveform into another, almost always you want the thing you're crossfading into to be the dominant or primary sound, because usually, whether it's melodic material or drum material or whatever, at the point you switch over to a different sound, you usually want that sound to take over pretty obviously on whatever beat you've placed its start point on, right? You want it to take over. You want this sound to turn into this sound. You just want it to happen smoothly without any pops or clicks or without a real jarring kind of change in timbre or spectral characteristics, right? So usually what you want to do in theory is leave this clip start right on the beat you want it to start, and you want to crossfade into the preceding clip, into the previous clip. This is cleaner. It's usually the result you want. You want the crossfading to happen here so that by the time it hits this transient or whatever, it sounds natural and everything's faded correctly, right? Now, there might be some special occasions where you actually do want it to crossfade a little bit into this clip. And you can do that, right? You can make the first part of this clip be overridden a little bit by the crossfade. So sometimes you do want that. Sometimes you want the crossfade to effectively straddle the line where those two clips merge into each other, right? So sometimes you're going to want a crossfade where the midpoint of the crossfade is actually like pretty much right over the grid line where your clips start and stop. Like if I hold shift so I'm not snapping to the grid here, I can get that X right on the grid line. Okay, so there's a couple ways you might want to do a crossfade, but usually, theoretically, conceptually, the best way to start, let's just Control Z until all that stuff's done. The best way to start is the clip you want to move into is sacrosanct, crossfade from it into the previous clip, and then decide if you want to instead move all this to somehow straddle the line into both fades, right? That's a viable option. Now you can see in this particular example, you can see that real crossfading is happening when I go in this direction. See the transients here, but as I crossfade into it, it starts changing and it's clearly starting to include elements of the original waveform that are hiding under here. Let's undo that and show you that really carefully. Just going to scooch this over for a minute. And if I drag this out, you can see there's more waveform right here. Under the audio event underneath this clip extends out past the end of, even the audio event down here. Again, if I take the audio event itself, well, see, I can't really do it in this mode. Let's do it in the clip mode. If I take the audio event itself and drag it outward, you can see more waveform. But we're going to go back in here to track mode and just keep working this way. So that's the reason we were seeing a visible kind of crossfading happening when I do this, right? We're seeing the underlying waveform here be dominant until we get to this midpoint. And then the waveform that was originally all hiding here, again, if I undo this, there's all this waveform here. And at the midpoint of the crossfade, see, this waveform is dominant up through the midpoint, and then it's tapered down to nothing. And then right here, that more subtle waveform of this clip starts fading upward, right? And so that takes over. So that's what a crossfade looks like, but it can be a little confusing when you move in this direction. And then it looks like your clips aren't lined up. Now there's a quick and dirty way to test that you actually have a real crossfade here. If I hold down Alt and jiggle, you can see this waveform moving in and out. And you can see that the old waveform from the other clip is still there and not moving when I jiggle, right? So that shows me I've got a crossfade going on. And then I can let go, and just like in my previous clip, if you do Control Z, whoops, I did too many Control Zs. If you do Control Z, you get back exactly where you were. And I could do the same thing on this side. I could hold Alt and jiggle, and sure enough, I can see that there's waveform in that crossfade. And then if I want to get back to where I was, I let go and do Control Z, and now I've got the same crossfade I set up. So this is the quick and dirty test for crossfades. But there's still a problem. We've made this kind of surgical crossfade. We still have this 2-bar loop, but now I've got 2 separate clips, and the crossfade is happening at the clip level. And if I wanted to duplicate this section somewhere else in my track, I have to be really, really careful to always multi-select these 2 things together, like by holding down Control and clicking both of the headers. And then I can do something like, duplicate, drag it over here. And now I've got the same exact situation here. But if I make one little mistake, like if I go, well, let me move this clip over here. And then, oh crap, that's right, I need this clip too. Let me move this clip too. And you move it over here, and now everything's messed up. Let's try that again. Put you here. Everything's totally messed up. I don't have a crossfade anymore. I just have one out fade and end fade on this clip. There's no fade here. If I put them together, there's no magic crossfade that happens. Just everything's messed up, right? Oh crap, how do I get back where I want? Undo, 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 and then carefully, surgically copy, paste again. So my point is, sometimes it's easier to do your crossfades up in the arranger on the track level of things. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's actually easier. I'm just going to undo a few times. It's easier to put these into a single clip and do the crossfading inside the events. So let's see how that works. Double click this. Zoom in a little bit so that I'm seeing both of the events. What I'm going to do is just basically take this clip container and I'm going to drag it over. Oh, well, actually, I can't do that because I had already reset the size of this. Let's drag this over here. I'm going to take this audio event and let me think how I want to do this. Yeah, we're going to do it a different way. This is where I want this audio event to stop. And this one's 2 bars long. So I'm going to drag this clip container to be out here another 2 bars and then drag this audio event back into where it was. So I now have this empty space here. And this is where I want that crossfade to happen. Now I'm going to take this event and slide it over into this clip, like so. And the event is still at the same place I put its start and end point. Remember, you can test, and I had already truncated this clip over here to this side. Let me let go and do Control Z to put it back where it was. So this is the crossfade I want to have happen. And I can do the same sort of crossfading action here between the two events. See how I have this white marker and this white marker? So let's say I want to crossfade into this clip. Drag, crossfade this way. And now, I can set up a crossfade that's like a beat long. Let's test and see if the crossfade is actually there and that there's audio in both sides of the crossfade. Yep, see how I'm sliding and I can see this audio is still staying put. Control Z to undo. Let's slide this side. See, we can clearly see that there's audio in both sides from both of these events. Control Z. From both of these events, there's audio extending into each other on this crossfade. So we're getting a true crossfade. And then now, the advantage of that is now I just have one clip to move around. I can move it. I can dupe it. Right? I can loop it. Let's loop it. Looping's fun. Loop it a couple times, and in all the loops, the crossfade's perfect, right? So this is another reason why Bitwig has this concept of 2 containers for audio. When you're doing really surgical stuff, especially like crossfades, sometimes it's a lot easier to do all that surgical stuff inside of a bunch of different samples, completely different independent samples, inside of a single clip container, and then you can just magically reuse that clip container everywhere. I could save this clip to my library, and it's already got both of these samples inside of it, and the crossfade's already set up, and everything's just ready to go if I drag it back out of my, my clip library where all my clips are. Very, very useful trick, but it's different at first, and it'll drive you a little crazy. So I guess the main point of what I've been showing you so far is a lot of times when you're tempted to do crossfades up here in the arranger, because you want a predictable result you can reuse in different places in your project or reuse in other projects, don't do the crossfades up here between 2 clips. Instead, do the crossfades between 2 audio events and put them inside a single clip. And now you have this single thing you can move around. And it's just always good and always works. Okay, so that's the main point I wanted to show you here with the difference between doing crossfades up here versus crossfades down here. Now there's one last gotcha. There's one last confusing thing about crossfades. So we're gonna get all the way back to where we were. Let's just delete this track entirely and start from scratch. So we're gonna take any old drum loop and let's go get some other different thing. All right. This one's at 114. I really should have used something that had the right metadata in it, so I didn't have to show you this yet. But I guess it's good to burn it in. This one is at 110 BPM. Oh, no, it's already at 110, so I don't even need to warp that. I could leave that one raw. So we'll leave it at its original raw tempo because it matches my project tempo of 110. So here's the thing. Here's the thing that will confuse you many, many, many times over. I have 2 different clips. I want to put them together. And let's say for whatever reason, even though this is a tiny short clip, let's say I want to do a crossfade here. My question to you is this: how can you crossfade material that doesn't overlap into each other? All right. And what I mean by that is, let's zoom in here and let's drag the border of this clip out. See how the underlying audio event just stops here? This clip was already at the end of the underlying audio event. There's nothing more out here. I can go this way and make the audio event shorter, but I can't go any farther this way because that's literally the end of the original sample, right? Even if I make this clip longer and I try to drag this event out to the full edge of the new, I can't do it not unless I stretch. That's the next video. So the point is, the event stops here. The material stops here at the edge of this clip at the end of bar 4. Likewise for this one, if I drag this border out and we try to okay, I can go inward, but I can't go any further in this direction. So this is the start of this event. There's no audio here, right? So if I put this back here, we can see that the audio stops at the end of this clip and the audio starts at the beginning of this clip. So if I put these two clips together, right? If I put them right up against each other and I do a crossfade, it looks like I made a crossfade, but there's no crossfade. All there is a fade out on this clip. Got that? Are you confused? All right, let's unpack it. Let's undo the crossfade. Let's crossfade from this one into this one. Hey, it looks like I crossfaded, but you didn't, because there's no actual material to crossfade. There's nothing past the edge of this clip to crossfade into this other clip, because they're both starting and ending right next to each other. Okay, let's test that theory. Let's use the slide test to see that. I'm going to go over here and hold down Alt and slide this waveform. See how there's nothing moving inside of the crossfade? Nothing moves inside the crossfade area. Let's Control Z. Control Z one more time, because I did this too many times. And Control Z, let's get rid of the crossfade. Let's show it to you again. I'm going to crossfade from here into here. Looks like I have a crossfade, but if I hold down Alt and drag this way, there's a disconnect. You can see that this audio event ends right where the crossfade starts. Okay, there's no crossfade. Control Z to undo. Let's crossfade in this direction. If I move this audio event, you can see that it moves, but there's nothing else extending over from this clip into the crossfade area, right? There's no crossfade. It's just fading out this clip. Let's Control Z to undo. All right. So the point is, this waveform and this waveform have to overlap somehow in order to make a crossfade. Okay. Now, other DAWs try to be helpful. I have seen other DAWs do a trick where if you put two clips side by side like this, where this one is clearly ending here and this one's clearly starting here, and you do whatever their little trick is for making a crossfade, a visible crossfade, what they actually do kind of under the cover is I've seen them loop this clip, and they actually start a loop point right here, and what they give you is the beginning of this full clip, right? What's happening here, they just loop it right here, and the crossfade happens over the start of the clip right after it's looped again. Okay? Now, if you think about that, it seems okay, but it's really not the actual portion of the waveform you wanted to crossfade. So Bitwig just doesn't let you do that. Bitwig says, no, you need to understand what's going on with your waveforms. And if you want to do a crossfade, you need to make sure they actually overlap somehow. So, for example, this is a 1-bar clip. It's a half-bar clip, for whatever reason. The logical place to crossfade this into another clip, right? You usually want your clips to be 4 multiples of 4, or 2, or 1, or 8, right? So the logical place to fade these two clips into each other would be to drag it over on top of this clip and let go. And now, this clip, even though it's stopping here, the underlying audio still extends all the way out to here. So now there's audio from this clip hiding underneath this clip. And so if I do a crossfade now from this clip that still has audio hiding all the way over here, if I crossfade from here into here, right? We can even see how this clip, these are tiny little transients, but if I crossfade far enough, we see suddenly these big transients, these boomy, kicky looking, subby, siny waveforms here. That's because this is the part of this clip that was hiding underneath this other one. And so this crossfade happens all through this material that overlaps. And I can test it by holding Alt and wiggling a little bit. And now you can clearly see both of the waveforms are sitting in that crossfade zone. There's a little bit of both of them in there, right? And then I can let go and do Control Z to get back to where I did the crossfade, right? So that works. However, if I drag from this direction over here, again, we got no crossfade because that's the start of the clip. This clip is not extending or overlapping into the end of this clip. We just made this clip sit on top of this other clip. So you're going to struggle with this. Other DAWs try to make it easy on you by doing some fakey things. In Bitwig, you're going to have to understand what your audio clips actually look like, and you're going to have to make sure they're overlaying, and you're going to have to understand what overlay is what. And often the best way to test that is, again, with the audio slide gesture. Hold down Alt, and I'm going to slide this one over, and I can see there's nothing here. That was the beginning of the clip. Let go, Control Z to undo. I'm back where I was. Let's test this one. Hold down Alt, slide over. Oh yeah, I definitely have a lot of audio from this clip that's now sitting under this clip, right? So I can let go, Control Z to undo, and put the audio exactly back where it was on the grid. And now I know I can crossfade in this direction because this is the clip that has additional material off the end of it this way. But what I can't do is crossfade in this direction. Why? Again, because if I do the slide test, there ain't no audio over there. Control Z, slide test, there's no audio over there. So there's nothing to crossfade over here because none of this audio overlays this audio, right? Oops, too many undos. Oh, for fuck's sake, Control Z, there we go. If I want to, for some reason, crossfade in this direction, what I first have to do is take this clip and overlap some of this clip, like so. Now, if I do the slide test, you can see there's actual material hiding over there. So if I Control Z to undo, and I do a crossfade in this direction, I can crossfade at least as far as that other clip sits. And if I slide now, you can actually see this part of the clip working through the crossfade to that point. And you can see that's where it ends and starts. So what I'm showing you are some tricks and techniques that all revolve around using audio slide to understand where your audio is, to see the crossfaded material, to even do things like adjust the crossfade. And then, after you do a quick test, you can just leave it in a weird spot and just do Control Z, however many times you need to get back to the actual crossfade you set up. So there's ways to test this, right? Okay, yep, I got that crossfading into the other one. We're good. Let me just leave it out here in a weird spot and Control Z. Oh, I did too many Control Zs. Control Z to undo. All right, so crossfading, it will confuse you. Remember the slide test. Remember to think clearly. Have I got audio in this area that I want to overlap with the crossfade? Make sure you understand which direction the audio overlaps the other clip. And then you got a crossfade. And now if you want to adjust this crossfade to actually straddle the line, you can take the handles and do even more because there's material on both sides to work with, right? And you can hold Shift to stop snapping it to grid lines and get everything lined up exactly the way you want. And then it doesn't really matter what these look like. But again, I did all this at the clip level, which works. If this is the one and only place I ever want to do this crossfade in this entire project, but if I want to reuse this now crossfaded clip, I probably would have been a lot smarter to have done all this down here with audio events instead of with clips. And then they could all be sitting inside one clip and I could just drag that clip around to do whatever I wanted. Okay, tips and tricks and gotchas for crossfading. I'll see you in the next episode.